Hey, good afternoon. Welcome to Reloved Guitar Workshop and the progress of the vintage Stratocaster. So last time it was in pieces and I was doing the neck. That's finished and I've put the neck back on, reinstalled it and done nothing else other than attach some, fit a new set of strings. So the remaining jobs to do on this guitar are to check the nut action and check the bridge action, and then to get a good playing action as a result of that, and then intonate the strings. Everything else about this guitar so far suggests to me that those things, or the intonation certainly, will be good already. Now, looking at the nut action, there's a tiny amount of tiny little bit too high for my liking, but at the moment it still plays nicely, which is a sign of a really good guitar even with those things unadjusted. So what we'll do is we'll go through the various steps to get this just right. I'm just looking around, noticing that I don't have my glasses, so I'm going to put you on pause. Hold on. Take two. Right, glasses on. Okay, yes, so here we go. So what we want to do is get an ideal playing action. So I'm going to pull up some feeler gauges that I've got in here. And they're not absolutely essential to do this job, but they help. But the great thing about all of this work is you can do a low-tech version or a high-tech version, it's up to you. Pretty much everything is doable as a low-tech version, and I'll sort of give you an idea, try and give you an idea of how, using various things as an example. Okay, so the first thing to note is I'm just looking for, do we have in here, do we have a capo? Yeah, we do actually, that's quite useful for a minute. So the first thing to say about string, the action on the nut, I'm just going to test out this capo. Right, that's good. The first thing to say about this is, of course, there are manufacturer's settings for how high this action should be over the first fret when it comes off the nut. Now, you can go and look those up if you want to, and we could work to those, but actually I have another way of doing it, which is in a way quite a lot simpler and less complicated. Same thing. So what I often do is put a capo on the first fret, and then I look very closely at the action of the strings over the second fret and beyond, because in a way this action is now perfect. Everything's easy to play, and many times if you think you have a guitar that you don't know whether the action should be lowered, you know, whether or not it's the right action on the first fret, put a capo on the first fret and see what happens to your guitar, and immediately you start playing your chords as if that was your new nut. Immediately you'll hear a beautiful guitar emerge that's easy to play and has barely any clearance of the strings over the first fret, and yet doesn't suffer from any buzzing or ill effects whatsoever. So the point being is that the height you've just achieved of the strings over the new first fret, this one here, is a good guide height for what you should be hoping for when those strings come over the first fret directly off the nut. And of course, the thing that's easy for you to check is when you put your capo on and you look at the actual physical size under there, and I'm going to use a kind of makeshift device to check this. So you can use pretty much anything, but let's say for example I've got a plectrum handy and I go, let me just run this under here until the point at which it snatches and gets caught under the strings. Right, so you go, okay, it's gripping there a bit, I can feel it getting stuck. There, it's just pulling, and there is probably the width of that. It's not exactly scientific because it's tapered this anyway, but let's say under that fret there, you can see that that's about that plectrum thickness is the thickness of the height of the gap at what we've got here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fret. So how do you make sure you can reproduce this? Well, if you took your capo off now and move this back one, right, what you're looking for is to lower this action here until you get that string is just beginning to touch on that plectrum there. Okay, so you can use anything, and maybe if it's thicker, then you stop here when it starts to catch, and you take the capo off and you move it back one, and you go, right, when I start cutting this slot, I want this string to just start to pull, and you can see there's a gap, and you can press it down and hear it making a noise because it's dropping quite a bit. So that's one really low-tech way of doing it, and it's a revelation to me when I found out that putting a capo on was a really simple way of working out how your guitar should play. And actually it's such a revelation because if you've got a guitar that's got a crappy action here, if you really want to convince yourself of a test, I'll prove it to you, go to your crappy guitar that's unplayable, right, with its impossibly high action that hurts your fingers and sounds out of tune. Put a capo on the first fret. Don't over tighten it, of course, just get it just about right. Capo it on the first fret and then tune it up then and play it as if that was the nut. And I tell you what, I guarantee you, you will have a guitar that plays beautifully and is a joy to play, and the guitar that you suddenly want to have because your guitar has suddenly been born again as a result of that little trick. Now all we're going to do is, with our adjustment here, is we're going to take those slots down on this nut to reproduce those kinds of heights above the first fret that we've got here with our little capo rig. My question here is, why don't they do that in the factory? Well, like all things, for some reason it seems too much work to do. Sometimes people say things like, well, we leave it because everyone has a different preference, and I don't buy that, to be honest. There is every single guitar I've done, you can pretty much set to a standard, and I can use just to make the point, I can use a thingamajig, what do you call them? Feeler gauge is what they're called. I can use a feeler gauge, and I can tell you that capoed on the first fret, just about every guitar I've set up, let's just do this, capoed on the first fret, every guitar I've set up comes in and just starts to tug on the, just about tugs on the following fret as a 0.20 millimeters. Okay, that's a 0.2 of a millimeter. That, even if you're feeling a bit nervous that's too much, say to yourself, okay, I'm going to up that to 0.25 and use your feeler gauge to up it. But you know that every guitar I've ever done with the neck set just about right, with the relief set right, has about 0.2 when you capo it at the first fret and the strings go over the new first fret. If it's more than that, your playing action could be set way too high up here, but that only makes a tiny difference down here. Or alternatively, your neck could be really over bent, in which case the distance will be even greater. But on a neck set correctly, with a playing action that is sort of about right, my experience shows, for me, it might not be true for you, but the experience I have shows me that about 0.2 of a millimeter on these blades, feeler gauges, 0.2 of a millimeter is a really good distance. So that means if I want to use a feeler gauge, I can take this off, and my job then becomes to drop each of these strings down until they are exactly 2.2 of the millimeter. And what you can do to check that they're not is you can put this feeler gauge underneath, and first of all you can look up close and you can see the shadow of the string with a clear air gap, so it can tell you straight away. I can see there's quite a bit of distance to go down. Now that might equate to 1/10 of a millimeter filing here, but it'll make the guitar so much easier to play. So what I do, here's what I tend to do, I slack off the first string. I'm just going to support this neck with a block of cork there. Slack off the first string, and I'm going to use some little feeler gauges that I bought from eBay, which they're not feeler gauges. They're what do I get? They are little files that are used to clean welding nozzles, and they happen to come in some sets which kind of mimic the size of the slots on most guitars, or most average medium gauge strings. So they actually work as little files. So I can take the thickest one, my so-called E, and I'm going to just cut into that nut and just blow it away. And I'm going to do a tiny bit at a time, then I'll tune back up. Roughly, it doesn't have to be exact tuning, but tuning it up so that it's approximately the right pitch. And then I check the feeler gauge again, and I can see there's still fresh air between the string and the feeler gauge, so I can do a bit more. And so my job here is just on this first E string, I just cut away a little bit at a time, nothing too extreme, slightly tilting backwards because I want the string to come slightly upwards to the front of the nut. Again, doesn't matter, it doesn't have to be precisely in tune, it just has to be enough so that the tension's approximately the same as it is when you're playing it. And again, check the gap, and I can see visually there's a gap between that string at the moment and the feeler gauge, which means I've got some more room to do. And I just keep going very gently. No need to rush this. In fact, it's critical you don't rush this. Now, if you're doing this for the first time, I recommend you have a spare nut handy. But even if you're doing it for the first time and you don't have a spare nut, you can do a repair, a quite temporary, quick and dirty temporary repair. The problem with this the repair is it usually applies to a white nut because it involves baking soda and super glue. It's a very effective way of recovering if you've dug too deep. You can fill this hole in with a little pile of baking powder, and you can drop a blob of super glue onto it. Obviously on a black nut like this it would look a bit grotty, but you could, if you had a white nut standing by, you could, or if you did it on a white nut, you could do that repair. I'm just going to be very careful because I don't want to have to put white baking powder in to try and repair a black nut. So I'm not far away there, there's still a bit of fresh air, still can see it going down. And be very careful that as I go down with this, I don't cut into the wood in any way, or into the fingerboard or the wood on the rear side of the nut itself. These files aren't the sharpest things in the universe, but they are a hell of a lot cheaper than buying 150 quid's worth of official nut files, which, if you've got the money and you're doing this a lot, which I'm increasingly doing more and more, I may be tempted to buy some myself. But right now I'm kind of staying with a low-cost option. Also, really to show you, to do this work yourself, you don't actually have to spend an absolute fortune. Okay, so I'm going to stop there, and partly I'm going to stop there because I think for my liking, the action on this is all a bit high. So, having said we were happy with the action, I'm just going to go back to this end of it before I take any more off the nut. I'm just going to put this E string action a bit more as I prefer it to be. And again, this is a it's not a scientific thing. You can get your device out and say, I want 2 millimeters at the 20th fret, or 1 millimeter at the 20th fret, and you can wind it down. Or you can just do it by eye and feel. And it's not hard to do. You put your little Allen key into the bridge saddles and you wind them down, and your strings go down with it. And if I wanted to check it, I could just double check and say, well, that's about 1.5 millimeters. Take a little bit more out and see what we've got. Now, of course, we need to check that it's now that's a tiny bit too low. Incredible action, but probably physically a bit too low for my liking. Plays all the way, but I might wind that up just a tiny bit, just so that it's a bit more as I would like it. There's no reason pursuing lowness for the sake of it, to the point that your guitar actually feels or sounds bad. Low is only good. That's good. Low is only good insofar as it's as low as you want to play, or as low as suits your style. Okay, so I have that pretty much the way I want it. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to follow suit on all the others, just to lower them a little bit. And at this stage I'm doing it by eye, and what I'm doing is I'm lowering it in a way that I'm trying to mimic the, what do we call it, the radius of the guitar neck. So I'm looking to follow that curve if I can, and I guess it follows that in that case your strings will have a slight, your saddles will have slightly different settings on each of the pegs, or the grub screws I should say, because you're going to be slanting them slightly, so they wouldn't all be on each single saddle. The grub screws would not be in exactly the same place. That's what I'm trying to get at. Okay, so I'm just taking these round down to a level that feels to me that I'm comfortable with, and follows the radius of the guitar reasonably well. It's quite nice. And again, you can see that most of the time I'm doing this by eye. If you want to use measuring tools and so on, of course you can. That's what they're there for. But it isn't necessary. You can do this stuff visually and set it quite comfortably the way you like it. So I'm just going to get this done so I've got the action back to where I prefer it, approximately, because what you do at either end will of course affect the action at the other end to a degree. So if you're going to reduce the playing action at the bridge end, you will to a small degree lower the action at the nut end. So that's why just before I do any more on the nut slots, I'm just going to make sure this was the way I like it and not a tiny bit too high. Okay, I will stop there and tweak in the middle. Now it's all gone out of tune for the time being, which is natural because we've adjusted the saddles. I'm just going to take a tuning off another guitar. And back again. Batteries on the camera conked out there. It's not easy to see. Okay, so we set the action back to a playing action that I'm comfortable with, and we'll go back to this corner, back to this end of the guitar, just to check the height of the nut. And with those adjustments, to me that's just about fine. Now the interesting thing about this is from here on inwards I don't need to use the gauge. And the reason for that is I can do it visually, as I did down that end. There is a gap, when you look at the string you've just done, there's a gap underneath that and a shadow on the fret. And you can see visually how high that is, and actually your eyes are, it'd be good to learn to trust your eyes, because actually they're very sophisticated instruments and you can really see the difference, and you can actually very accurately get the two things the same without using any more feeler gauges. And in fact your eyes are probably more accurate than using a feeler gauge. Your perception is more accurate. So we take the second string, the A, just unwind it enough to get to work on the slot, and then we use the second size one, the A, effectively the A string, thingy, and we just go into that slot. These are just slightly bigger than the slot. It's not a problem if it is a little bigger. Okay, and I'm just going to do this back up to tuning. Okay, back up to pitch, and then check the gap again, and then back out. As I said, there are professional luthier sets of files to do this work with, and of course, as with a lot of tools, the case with a lot of tools is that with many tools you can still do the same job without the tool, but one thing's for sure is it takes a lot longer. In the case of these files, it takes longer. It's less accurate by microns, but accurate enough to do the job. And the tools sets, like I say, about 150 quid for a set of files to do the same job. Or there are other ways which I've tried out and actually do work really well. Although I think, to be honest, I have a feeling that it might be quite controversial if I did it. People might get really upset. I've experimented with using a triangular file and used that same file to do all of the slots. Now that costs about £1 as part of a set. It's a diamond file. It's very quick, very effective, very straight, very clean cutting. And for £1, that can do all of these. And because I'm not doing it to any measured depth, I'm doing it to a depth tested by the distance over the fret. This file will do the same job for every fret. You get the same sized slots, but because you think about it, the string is sitting at the bottom of a V, and as long as the string is at the right height above the first fret, it doesn't matter whether that slot is a slot that's exactly the diameter of the string, or whether it is the string sitting comfortably at the bottom of a V-shaped slot. And in fact, it might be a good argument to say that for tuning stability, putting a string into the bottom of a V-shaped slot where it only makes 2 points of contact on the string on either side, if you think about, kind of visualize the string sitting in a V, makes 2 points of contact, whereas if you put the string into a slot that's been cut with a round file, then the string, everything in the lower half of the string, the kind of half of its circumference where it sits in the groove at the bottom, the whole of that half circumference will be touching the plastic or bone of the nut, and theoretically could well stick more than a string that was sitting touching only 2 points at the bottom of a V shape. So it's interesting. I think people may or may not have issues with what it looks like when they get a guitar with nut slots that are bigger than they expect. The issue for me is, does it do the job? And actually it does the job, and it does it much quicker. So I'm sort of often tempted to, perhaps on guitars that aren't so critical, or people may not be quite so particular, I'm quite tempted to use the triangular file because it's so effective and it achieves exactly the same functional result, with, as I say, a possible case that it's more effective. Some argument, at least in his favour. I can't figure a good argument against it, I have to say. So we're nearly there with this second one of the A string, and then we just basically do the same across all the strings, erring on the side of a little at a time, so that we don't get into the panic that we have to go and find another replacement nut, or start thinking about trying to fill this in with baking powder and super glue, which, as I said, on this one would not be very pretty. Some nuts are made of softer plastic than others, and it can be an absolute pain to try and cut with any kind of file. And actually what I have found is that that really works then, and sometimes I've been almost forced to use that when none of these other things work. But as I say, numerous ways to do the same thing. The professional equipment that you pay quite a lot of money for will make things easier, quicker, possibly. The only thing you're watching out for is that you don't overcut it and the strings don't end up buzzing straight away on the frets, so that they don't ring or sound out clearly. It's almost there, fraction away. What I'll do then is I'll stop it and restart it when I've done the rest. We'll come back to the next stage of the setup. Okay. So don't, as I said on many of these videos, I'm only speaking from experience, and I'm not saying that any way you do it or anyone else does it is right or wrong. I just know what works when I do it. So it's just a suggestion. If you want, there's a reason why I do it a certain way. If you don't agree with it, do it another way. That's fine. Right, 2 done. I'm now going to switch off and continue with the others. I'll see you in a minute. Right, welcome back to the final stage of setting up this vintage Strat. Having set the height of the nut and having set the playing action approximately, well, not set the playing action that I like, it's very, very low, just because this makes playing chords for a long time easy. I'm not particularly a guitarist, but I guess some people also like that because it allows them to play fast guitar across the neck. Again, it's one of those things to taste. That's the kind of height or the action I like, but other people may like it a little bit higher, and that's doable by replacing the nut. It's quite easy to get hold of another plastic or bone nut, and you can knock this out quite easily with, well, you have to go sideways with these Strats, but you can take the nut out and you can put another one in and adjust the action to suit. So the part we're at now is the intonation, and the intonation is, I'm trying to find my screwdriver for this. The intonation is where we set the actual length of each string so that it is perfect for the neck that is on this guitar. And that's all it really means in technical terms. It means we make sure that the free length on each string is exactly right for the rate at which these frets get closer together down the whole neck. What does it mean in practice? Well, it means that if the intonation is way out, it means that as you fret notes further and further up the neck, in fact, they won't be true in tune with the open string if you've got this distance wrong. So, for example, if this bridge was positioned an inch closer, you might think you can play a chord, an open chord down here, and it might sound just about acceptable, but as soon as you start playing a note further up here, you'll actually find that note is slightly sharp, or quite a lot sharp of what it should be, and therefore it will sound out of tune with anything else played down here. So intonation is about getting exactly the right length for every string on your guitar, and we do this using a tuner, an amp, and plug the guitar in, and we're looking to tune each of these strings so that it's in tune on the 12th harmonic, which you achieve by pinging the string. I'm going to turn it up so you can hear it. It's about right. You can see that the tuner is very sensitive. I'll zoom in a bit on that so you can see it move. Now, if it's sharp, see what happens when a note goes sharp. The tuner moves, and that's also slackened, bent the string slightly. I'm just going to, it's quite new strings, in fact they're new yesterday, so I'm just going to pull them again to take up the slack. So we tune to the harmonic on the 12th fret, and then we fret the string And if that's the perfect length, if the length is exactly right, that note will not show sharp when you fret it at the 12th. And that is slightly sharp, which means the string length on this guitar, the length of this string is a fraction too short. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull the bridge saddle towards the back of the guitar by winding it in. Now I'm going to replace this head with a Phillips head because I don't like messing up those. I don't like messing up any heads on screws, but on these particularly, because of the way you're coming at it from the side, it can be very easy to chew up the head, and they do have a slot as well as a cross in them. So if you can use, I prefer to use the slot. Now clockwise on this drags the saddle backwards a little bit, and as it does so, it'll make the whole string go sharp. So you'll hear it's sharp now. So we detune it till we get it perfectly on the 12th fret harmonic. And there you go, that's pretty much on. That's almost no movement at all. So that little adjustment has made the string, that perfect adjustment, tiny little adjustment has made it the right length for this neck. That means it's intonated correctly. The other thing you might notice is when I'm doing these things, I'm damping all the other strings so that I can just hear one of them ringing out. And also, because of the way that the tuner works, that it's obviously sensitive to sound, so you can't do this and talk. You'll be pleased to hear. Again, slightly sharp, so we'll do the same thing. We will just go clockwise on this, 1 or 2 turns to bring the bridge slightly that way. Again, it will make the note sharp. Perfect. So almost there, just two turns on the screw, or I think probably half turns. There's a little ping there, which I don't like. It's the string catching in the nut. I might have to just take a bit of graphite to that. Now that one's quite a bit flat, which tells me that the string length is too long, which means we need to go the other way now on this. So we will give it a couple of quick turns anti-clockwise, which will lower the pitch of this string. Pretty good. Secured that. Flat again. So if it's flat, it means the string's too long. So we're going to go counterclockwise to shorten the length of the string. That makes the tone, the pitch of the string, go down at this point. Still a tiny bit flat, so again I'll go counterclockwise a tiny bit more, not too much because we're nearly there. And just find the slot correctly without putting my grandad glasses on. Sometimes these you've got to be careful with these bridge saddles. Sometimes they don't move. You can undo the thing, but they stay in place. So you need to give them a little push sometimes, just to make sure they have moved. You'll tell if they've moved because the pitch of the note will change. close. Again, flat, which means the string's too long, so we go anti-clockwise to bring the nut towards the neck, and this sounds like it needs about 3 or so of those. And again, I'll give it a little tap, make sure it moved full length. Tiny bit flat still, so a couple more moves, turns anti-clockwise. Still flat, so we'll come a couple more anti-clockwise turns. Doesn't look like it's moving to me, but the proof that it is moving, I mean, one way you can do it, a simple way you can do it, is to get a screwdriver, and you can tap, well, a rubber thing, and just tap each of these adjustment screws to make sure they're seated in. Close, good enough. Can be quite hard to get a reading on some of these low notes. That's significantly flat, and in a way you can see it if you could look right close over here. You can see that that's quite a big gap in positioning between the bridge on the low E and on the A. And when you do this a few times, you'll notice that the position of these things tends to follow a fairly familiar pattern, where they go in 2 clusters of 3 and they step backwards as you come down from the high string. Then it comes forward and then steps backward again. But the distance between them is never as great as you can currently see with this the E string and the A at the moment. So we've got quite a bit, I think, to slack off on there. Flat, still flat, so still some more shortening of the string. Again, you can hear the note going down, and I'm just going to make sure that that is pushed all the way that it's allowed in its travel. The spring, technically the spring that's in there should make that happen, but sometimes they get stuck on the coils of the screw. Still, now this one starts to look a bit surprising, because I'm not quite sure then what happens once this thing reaches its the same position as the A. There's normally a difference, and I don't know why now that's forward, but it's telling us it needs to be. And still saying quite significantly flat. get this low E to sound right. Got no effects on there, clean as anything. Can't believe a word this tune is telling me at the moment. Well, this is one of those guitars where I'm going to stop on that one because I don't want to come any further forward. I believe what it's telling me. That's bizarre. It's one of those that doesn't follow the normal pattern. So I'm going to stop where it is and come back to it when the strings are bedded in and see if it changes any. But there we go. Sometimes that happens. One or two guitars it's happened. I can give you another example. This homemade DIY orange guitar here. The intonation on the first three strings followed the normal pattern, and then on the final three, the bass strings, it actually almost seemed to go the opposite way. And I, as yet, haven't worked out the science behind why that was the case. Plays really nicely, but it doesn't follow the expected pattern. So somebody out there would probably know a lot better than I would. But it is one of those nice things about doing this, that you discover something that you can't explain, and actually you need to go and be able to explain it. But having said all of that, we come to the end of our setup. Nice clean sound, no messing about. are times when sometimes it works better tuning on the harmonics. So I might do it here. That's interesting. Ha! I'm tuning in the wrong key. This bloody app. Ah, what a devil. Hold on a minute. How can I change this over? Tuner settings. Drop capo -1. That's ridiculous. Dull. Somebody's changed that over. Okay, let's try it again. So now get it tuned correctly. That's right. Nice. Finally. Okay, so there we have the Squier Stratocaster vintage brand. As I said at the beginning, really nice quality guitar, lovely feel to it, lovely tuners, everything pound for pound, quality wise, everything on this guitar is better. The strings are still bedding in, but pound for pound, everything on it is better quality than the components on the Squiers. Everybody knows the Squire's better. The brand name counts for a lot, but it'd be really interesting if you get a chance, try out one of these vintage guitars, of which you can see here we've got a few lined up, and another one coming. So once this tuning finally settles down, having put new strings on, we look forward to playing this for an hour or two, and then putting it up on a listing on eBay. Sad to see it go because I love these vintage ones. But the nice thing is there are plenty of them out there, and that's good news for you too. If you just want to get hold of one, you shouldn't have any problem. Price is quite low, so if you see one that's come through the Reloved workshop, it's going to be quite a bit above the price of the vintages that you can find yourself out there. That's the way it is. That's why we do what we do. But you know, if you want one of ours, great. If you want to get one yourself, do recommend you try it, because they are fantastic quality. Okay, so until the next one, have a good weekend, bank holiday weekend. Enjoy your holiday.